One here.
Whoa, what was everybody talking about?
Most of them are yeah, online. So that's why you should start early. Oh, that's your water here. Good to see you. Yeah. Promote whatever to panelists. She's gonna have the panel. Promote panelists. Promote. Click on it again. Yes, give it. Yes. So we want online everybody.
So there are three of them. Sorry, don't mind me.
Don't worry, don't turn it yet. This with that. Hi, Iwa. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Oh my goodness, you went?
Yeah. So start your panel now. Right?
I can't start my panel here. My participants are not here.
Oh, how many are your participants? I think you have like 5 or 4, right?
Yes, and no one is here yet. So.
Oh, okay. So
someone is here live.
Is Dr. Phil is somebody in the room?
Yeah.
I can't see.
Sorry, Pele. Oh, yeah, turn the camera.
You can't see him.
Wait. How do you want to do your this thing?
I have it here, don't worry.
Okay, great.
I have it. What about one? Chat was not 301. 301 program. Sorry, what panel is supposed to be here? You are the one there. If you love what is your no? But can you check the participant? Let's see whether any of them should be still. Who is John? There's no John. I think I got this. What's happening?
It's a session now.
Is this your session? Sir?
Yes. Don't worry.
Okay, I thought you were confused that.
No.
Okay.
Session.
Yes, that's it. All right. Àwọn ọjà wà lára àwọn tó gbà ọ náà ó lámọ gbélé olójà ṣẹ́ẹ̀tì bírèkì. Let me call. I've been calling him since number is on. Take join me. Kí ló jẹ́ àìpẹ́? Hello, sir. Wọ́n expect you, sir. Wọ́n ti ó yẹ ká ti bẹ̀rẹ̀ o. Sir? No, ó ti wà online. Yes, sir. Jẹ́ ń pe nǹkan tó máa
So Dr. Phil is here already.
Okay. Yeah. Ahora son teorías de cámara. 친구 그런가? Você vê, tem lá Good.
Bàbá àti dé o.
Nothing why yeah, didn't you?
Ẹ káàbọ̀.
Àti dé. Àti dé. Mo kàn ní láti àtẹ̀sẹ̀ nìkan mọ̀. Àmì ẹ̀ṣá. Ìwà ọ̀nà. Àwọn
Yes,
èèyàn àwọn èèyàn wa dà. Àwọn èèyàn attend kí ni wà ní kí ló ń ṣe wọn. Wọ́n jáde.
Professor Olóríyọmí là ń dúró dè mí.
Wọ́n join. Mo ti send link yẹn sí wọn. So, like an hour ago.
Okay.
I
Thank
just
you.
spoke to them last one, yeah.
They can start.
Yeah, just wait for one more. Don't worry, we just just one more person coming online, then we'll start. Okay. No, it's still the same person. Okay. So once he joins, we'll be able to like manage our children.
So you moderate us, Abby.
What did you say?
I said you moderate us now, 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Accuracy.
Can you guys put on your video so that we'll
Yeah, sure.
yeah. Okay. That works. But you can hear me clearly now.
Perfectly.
I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
now
just that-
we're complete now. So we can
Yeah,
start, right?
I think we should rename him.
No, don't worry, it's
You
fine.
should rename it. Okay.
I can hear you.
No, okay, sir. So
I can hear you.
yeah, we'll wait for the chair to lead us on. So let's start. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and
Should I
participate.
How am I going to get my visual?
Please mute your mic. Okay. Should I proceed, Dr. Phil?
Yes, please, you can. We want to rename a prop, so just write on.
Okay. Okay. So before we proceed, I'd just like to provide a brief introduction about my thought process regarding the topic and the direction I wanted it to go in. So my primary research interest revolves around space and its various intersections, particularly how people derive meaning from it beyond the geographic description. So, and that goes hand in hand with the overarching theme of the conference, which focuses on people's cultures and institutions' emotions. And all of this greatly intrigued me. Rumor has it I'm a member of the rebellious Gen Z, and we're notorious for our extensive use of social media platforms. So I found it fascinating to explore these intersections of space and the African diasporic communities. So in particular, I delved into the concepts of space of flows as defined by the renowned geographer and sociologist Manuel Castell. And what it defines as space of flows is global circulation of capital, information, and ideologies within a network society. So I was especially interested in examining how these flows have shaped, reshaped, redefined African and African diasporic identities across different times and spaces. And once again, I would just like to say that I am grateful for the opportunity to be here today. I want to express my appreciation to the discussants for taking the time to engage in these discussions. It promises to be a very rich conversation. So I do not really want this to be so rigid in that sense. I'm open for a really flexible, rich conversation. So the discussants, we're going to speak for about 15 minutes each, and then we'll take questions and answers and, just have, a relaxed conversation. So, Dr. Field, do you want to take over or you want me to just go straight into my presentation?
Yeah, please go straight to your presentation. Thanks for having us here.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you may want to introduce the panelists, if you so desire.
Okay. So let me just introduce the panelists. So first we have Dr. Philip Olayoku, from the West African Transitional Justice Center. Then we have Dr. Akitela from University of Ibadan, Department of English. Then we also have Professor Shola Oloriyomi from the Institute of African Studies, University of Ibadan. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time out to be here. So I'm just going to go straight to my presentation. I'm going to share my screen.
So are you recording?
Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, great. So, okay, I should probably time myself. Let me start with timing myself. Sorry, please, so that I do not spend our time for anything. So yes, my topic is spatial realities of the Nigerian diaspora, exploring, sorry about that. Let me just adjust this. Okay. So exploring identity, belonging, and social media representation. So I'm going to start with this quick quote that I found from Quora, and I'll just read it out. Well, I'm sure they'll be welcomed and will fit right in as long as they're still Black, because I believe that Nigeria might be frustrating, though, but it's a very entertaining country. Not one dulling moment. So I believe every Nigerian in the diaspora somehow still have one foot in Nigeria. Either he has a company here or huge business, or he's sending money home to parents to build some things somehow. They're still sending money home. So I believe they should be welcomed and fit right in. Yes, we may feel like they ran away, but you wish you could run too. So unveiling spatial narratives. Human beings are social beings. Human beings are social, and we're characterized by an innate desire to establish and affirm a social place as home, a home where we as a family group or nation belong to. And, when we talk about the diaspora, it is rooted in the very idea of dispersion and in the idea that all human beings have a home. And it is from this idea that we talk about space, that space can be physical and imagined. You can't begin to talk about the homeland and the hostland without talking about the vast space that they encompass. So when I speak of spatial narratives, I am talking about the diverse ways in which Nigerians living abroad navigate and negotiate their sense of belonging, cultural identity, and connections to the homeland. And these narratives are shaped by the interplay of physical and virtual spaces. Diasporic communities utilize digital platforms to maintain ties with their cultural roots, even while they're adapting to their host societies. And, recent times have seen a rise of digital technologies and social media, and all of this has revolutionized how diasporic communities make meaning, how they construct their identities. And, like I mentioned earlier, this goes back to me drawing on Manuel Castell's concept of the space of flows, which is just about a reconstructing of traditional notions about space and creating new kinds of social interactions and identity constructions that, go beyond the traditional norms. So the focus of this study will be on the Nigerian diaspora in the UK and the US, specifically the generations 1, 1.5, and the second generation. So as we know, the Nigerian diaspora community is far from homogeneous. It encompasses a rich tapestry of diverse individuals, and it spans multiple generations. Each generation has their own distinct footprint. And why do I focus on these particular generations? Because the first generation, they're the ones that are born and raised in Nigeria before they migrate. You know, they have direct lived experiences in homeland culture and in context. So they are able, there's a way they navigate adaptation into the old society because they're adapting as adults. Whereas the generation 1.5, they're like the middle children. So they're born in Nigeria, they usually migrate at a young age or as adolescents. And so they have to straddle the homeland and the host cultures during their formative years. And what this leads to is a unique hybrid identity that is forged across nations. And then the second generation, they're born in the diaspora to Nigerian immigrant parents. So they do not culturally, like they have indirect ties to the homeland because they're culturally rooted in the host society. And what this means is that there is a negotiation of dual identities and belongings. And the reason why I explore this is that it just gives room to be able to explore, you know, generational nuances and the different levels of homeland connection and distance. And digital spaces for the Nigerian diaspora is very important because this is how they're able to assert their own version of identity and agency. And, you know, challenge reductive narratives. And that is where Yeku 2022 in his book Cultural Citizenship contends that there are various forms of social media expressions and they play a crucial role in the cultural production domain within Nigerian digital networks. So he calls the individuals that are actively engaging in digital culture, he calls them cultural netizens. And he says there is a need to really understand the possibility that comes with these social media platforms and the role that these Nigerian individuals are playing in these platforms. And when I think of, you know, Yeku's cultural netizenship, it also takes me back to the culture of real virtuality by Manuel Castells, which is an argument that states that reality has always been virtual because human beings right from time have consistently interacted through a set of symbols. And so there's always been a culture of real virtuality. I'm just going to do a brief overview of the Nigerian diaspora and diasporic movements because we can trace earliest migrations back to the 4 simultaneous slave trades, of which the largest was the transatlantic slave trade that had over 11 million slaves exported from, you know, West Central, and East Africa. And scholars have since come to do an estimate of about 2 million people that were lost from Nigeria. And so after this pre-colonial phase, we all know that Nigeria got her independence in 1960. And before the independence phase, there was also the colonial era where Nigeria saw an internal migration for labor during the colonial era. And also scholars have recorded as early as 1903 international migration flows. Then, of course, you had the post-independence, which was after 1960, which saw the immigration of highly skilled Nigerians, mainly to the United Kingdom and later to the United States for education and for work. So as at the late 1970s, 1980s, Nigerians were no longer returning to take up professional positions in the country. They were preferring to stay abroad longer and permanently. The early 2000s saw a less educated oriented migration to other European countries. And we cannot begin to talk about the Nigerian diasporic movements without talking about, you know, the most recent and most widely known view of migration that Nigeria has seen, and that is the Japa phenomenon, which is a translation that says to urgently flee. And it is a recent wave of youth migration and is driven by economic decline, insecurity, and, you know, a quest for greener pastures in that sense. And Nigerian youth are beginning to see education abroad as the easiest route to migration. And you have the UK, Canada, and the US as top destinations. And the interesting thing is, aside from the declining economic conditions, it was very important. Like scholars like Liu and Okwade and Awosise have come out to say that, oh, the Lekki massacre of the NSAS protests that occurred on October 2020 was the tipping point for many Nigerian youths. And this transformed their individual dissatisfactions into a collective urgency to leave. So there is no doubt that these migration patterns have resulted in a significant brain drain. As of 2007, there was an estimated 36% immigration rate. According to the PwC, official record says there are about 1.2 into 4 million migrants outside of Nigeria. That was as of 2017, with unofficial estimates saying there are about 50 million Nigerians in the diaspora. So according to the United Kingdom 2021 census statistics, it says there are about over 270,000 Nigerian born in the UK, compared to the 75,000 that they had in 2008. And the same, when you check the statistics of the US also, it says about 376,000 Nigerians are in the US. So what this means is there is a vibrant diasporic community that serves as a major source of remittance, because according to the PwC, again, the Nigerian diaspora accounts for over 1/3 of sub-Saharan migrant remittance inflows. In 2018 alone, there was about $23.63 billion that was remitted, with the United States taking the top list, followed by the United Kingdom as major sources of remittances to Nigeria. And that is why I focus on these two demographies, these two diasporic demographies. It's not also as if Nigeria has not been engaging with these resources and understanding that there's a need to tap into these resources of the diaspora, and that is why you have organizations like Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission that has been set up. So these are some of my research questions. Like I mentioned, I'm very interested in how digital spaces shape narratives.
She has 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. How do they navigate identity, belonging, authenticity in online spaces? Okay, so I'm just going to run through it because I have 5 minutes. Virtual cultural matrix, I propose this idea that there is an interconnected network that bridges imagined identities in digital spaces, and there is a tangible place-based manifestation of this. So basically, I draw on Stuart Hall and Manuel Castell to say that that there's a complex interplay between online imagined Nigerian diasporic identities. And you see this in remixed cultures, skits, memes, they're constantly, being reconstructed, being reworked. And also, I draw on the fluidity of spatial narratives in African indigenous literature, such as the works of Fagunwa and Tutola, to say that there are imagined expressions of spaces and they spill over to physical reality. And you see this when artists, creators, they integrate digital elements into physical works, when there's manifestations like cosplay, virtual reality experience, and gaming subcultures. So yes, this is a mixed method analysis. I focus on Twitter. I analyze 212 tweets using contextual keywords like IJGB, #Japa, Nigerians in the UK. I made use of a research design was mixed methods. I utilized multimodal analysis, correlation analysis, and thematic coding. So because I am running out of time, I am just going to go straight to the findings. The coding that I used for the tweets, I found out that there were 3 themes that were very prominent across these groups, the UK groups, the Nigerians in the homeland, and the US groups, which is the maintaining homeland connection, social integration in the homeland, and cultural authenticity. So basically, cultural authenticity is very significant for the Nigerians and the UK immigrants. It is less prominent for US immigrants. It is maintaining homeland connection is universal across Nigerians who stay in the homeland, the UK immigrants, the US immigrants, immigrants. Societal integration into the old society, very essential for the UK and US immigrants, while issues of generational differences and intergenerational conflicts, very unique to the US immigrant group. Again, I do a co-occurrence analysis to basically just talk about the themes and, just talk about how they're related, which builds on what I just said now. I also do a multimodal analysis, which was one of the reasons why I chose Twitter and X, formerly known as Twitter in the first place, which is that it gives room for multimodal analysis. So I analyzed some tweets that had videos, images in them. And one of the things that I found is that language use intersects with cultural authenticity, homeland connections in general, the generational differences. So language proficiency is tied to cultural authenticity across generations. And you see second-generation immigrants, first-generation immigrants making an effort to maintain linguistic and cultural ties despite geographic distance. So protests, for instance, make use of native languages to assert their roots and transnational solidarity. So in the correlation analysis, some of the insights that I got, the main insight that I got is that the UK immigrants, they are always dominating conversations that have to do with homeland related conversations. You will find them there. So I did correlation analysis of the engagement metrics, the likes versus retweets, likes versus comments, views and retweets versus view counts. And what I got is that, yes, UK immigrants dominate the conversation and engage mainly in homeland-oriented content. So synthesis, the multimodal discourse analysis, thematic frequencies analysis, co-occurrence analysis, and correlation analysis of engagement metrics on X provide valuable insights into how the Nigerian diaspora in the UK and the US navigates issues of cultural authenticity, belonging, and identity in online spaces. So what these findings reveal is that there's a complex interplay between imagined identities that are constructed within digital spaces and their tangible place-based manifestation, which was the core of my argument. And all of this is captured by my theory of the virtual cultural matrix. Thank you. So I will stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. You've taken the time to summarize your presentation, so we'll just move over to Professor Yomi for his own presentation.
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's a great honor to be here. So let's kick off. I'll start first by saying that there is the challenge we have probably is to first identify the several layers of concepts and ideas that are being proposed by the central theme, because it seems to have been shifting for a while. And I'm trying to call attention here to the need to understand each of these concepts and each of these ideas in the several ways that they might manifest. Okay, by this, I'll be sharing soon. That's what I'm trying to get by at this point in time. But let me just, can you, yeah, you can't see my screen yet?
Not yet, sir.
Okay, I have a hand also open. Okay, I'll see go on. Okay, so what I'm just basically trying to call attention to here is that we should endeavor to understand this concept in their singularity and also in their overlapping and sometimes in their contextual situations, and even if it's contradictory, because the sense that I get here is largely unitary. I don't quite get the nuances. I'll be more interested in I'm interested in the different manifestations of these conversations on diaspora and becoming, especially in relation to how space shapes identity. Now, having said that, I'm wondering the space of interdisciplinarity in this kind of conversation as to how much of the questions of space becoming African diasporic identities, which have implications for other questions like, of course, migration. I had stuff like Japa a while ago. Okay.
Sorry, sir. We can see your screen. If you can maximize the PowerPoint, then go to the presentation mode. But the screen is now visible to us. Yeah. Just to call your attention to it. Yeah.
Okay. Is this still visible?
Yeah, just to maximize because we are seeing half the Zoom window.
All right.
Yeah.
Is it full now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So then talk about. So I mean, this is just to quickly flip through all of these things. What I take from the central theme is on becoming. The question of becoming, I think, is the key issue here, and its interstices. That is its multiple manifestation. I think this should be obvious, and I think has also delved on this a bit. But let me quickly run. So I'm saying that, please, there's need. I said this just a while ago. A note on the diversity of these concepts, of these ideas, and their refiguration. That is to understand them in probably when I say singularity in the most popular presentations that they usually come. But then we know that these ideas also evoke other concepts and other symbols in our mind or in society through media representation and the rest. In their overlapping, in their contextual, even their contrary usage, and different manifestations, as it were. Now, so I move on to say that the way space shapes African diasporic identities necessarily will have to be understood from a very broad disciplinary perspective. The Manuel Castells that is being engaged is a geographer, and has been quite broad in the general description of urban, rural, and other special categories that can help us use this as a subset for understanding how these spaces also help to shape diaspora. I'm just wondering how much of the other perspectives and disciplines come in here, and I'm also wondering if we really need for some of these. I'm wondering if we really formally need them to be tagged space of flows or places of flows or space of flows necessarily. Shouldn't we also be thinking of the kind of work that Isaiah Wolfgang, has been talking about in terms of the general understanding of what constitutes a reality and the different layers of the fictive and the factual, and how within the factual we can find the fictive, and within the fictive itself we can also find the factual those kinds of readings seems to me to also resonate with the kinds of ideas that you are maybe propping up from Fagunwa and even Wale Ogunyemi, probably also occasional Amos Tutuola, writers from Nigeria. Okay, moving between fiction and drama.
You have 5 minutes, sir.
Spaces in general, I would say. I think you are interested likely here on spaces in terms of code switching, linguistic innovations, and mirror identities, shifts, and the active construction of hybrid spaces. And in relation to this, I'm just thinking of how you constitute more recent such spaces that I imagine in terms of how people are reconstructing trans-territorial identities of, say, other layers of spirituality, say, in bonding through music, because Afrobeat is something that it's popular also in that space. And I don't know how much of reggae they have, but high life is another one. I'm wondering if there are also emerging spaces of nations of those kinds of expressions of spirituality. So that's what I was calling attention to there. All right. Okay, I think this is basically part of it too. That's why I honed it, also calling to questions of also those spaces that may be determined by the sense of nationality of environmental spirituality, including religion also, that may also overlap, so that it doesn't seem like there's just one sense of singularity of the Nigeria, even in disaggregated forms, celestial, Christian, those kinds of Cherubim and Seraphim type of things. This is what I'm thinking of. I mean, it's still foggy in my mind, but I think that might just be something interesting in from there. Now, then the Manuel Castells that I get on spaces of flows here, the space of flows used to describe the global circulation of culture, capital, information, and images, I think it needs to be also more robust. It will be interesting to because Castell dominates this conversation so much, and I'm really just wondering if there are other voices apart from Castells, on the issue of same places and space of flows. It'd be interesting to see the contentions around this, and I do know that there are a couple of other such conversations which time will not allow me to. So okay, so for instance, how African musicians are utilizing stream. Okay, this I think it's from you and how people in Africa imagine themselves as part of the broader part African cultural community. I hinted at this at first because I know this is happening very strongly in the Ghanaian community, even in Nigeria, with the fusion of high life and Afrobeats as some kind of also their own sense of bonding and identity validation of their Ghanaianness wherever they meet. So what might this yield also for us in the context of the current conversation? And what else do I have here? Let me see. So broadly speaking, I think this is where I might, let me just see if there's something extra there. Okay, so this is just as it is. So in summary, therefore, I would just say that the question of becoming, first and foremost, is transitory and it is highly interstitial. And I think that other considerations would necessarily have to take this mood. I really enjoyed your presentation, thought-provoking, but these are just my own preliminary thoughts on the question of spaces and questions of identity also as pertains to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
To members of the panel and the audience. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Tella, are you still there? Dr. Tella, can you put, you are muted.
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still here. But I thought it was your turn, so I'll patiently wait for the even last to go first, and I'll wait.
No,
While
you
I
can
think
write. You can write on, please. Yeah, because I'm on ground. Technology can mess up at any time, so we'll yield the floor to you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir. Well, I think the title of my presentation, is Becoming Diaspora as Potentially Traumatic, Psychonarrating Major Characters in Selected Migrant African Fiction. It's actually a tall project. Perhaps what I should do from day one is to put forward the argument that I'm trying to advance. And then I can then go ahead and then provide some kind of evidence to support the argument I'm trying to advance. My argument takes up from some previous studies on African migrant literature. That's my entry point, major characters in African migrant literature. Some of these previous studies, like Forta 2007, like Ajibola 2021 and 2022, and a number of others have contended that migrant African characters experience some kind of post-colonial trauma at home. And this kind of post-colonial trauma becomes some kind of pre-migration stressors for them. And they make them to move out of the African space in the first place. Such stressors would be things like unemployment, poverty, sexual assault at the domestic level, and all of that. And that's when they move from the African space. I'm talking about new African diasporas. I'm not talking about the old one. People who are doing Japan and all of that. And then when they move out of the African space and they move to Europe, they leave the homeland and go to other places of their choice, that trauma is mobile, that the kind of traumatic experiences that they have still continue to live with them in those other spaces. My own argument takes off from there, that, well, it is true that trauma is mobile. There is traumatic mobility in the real sense of it, but that we should begin to pay attention to the nuanced transformations of those experiences, of those traumatic experiences, as they go from one space to the other, rather than bring an umbrella thing and say, well, they experience trauma at home, and then when they move out of the homeland, trauma still moves with them into the new spaces that they move into. But I come from a linguistic background. So what I do is to find a safe ground for myself in literary stylistics, so I can navigate the subject of literature and language at the same time. So my intention is to call call on linguistic evidence, as we have in this literary text, to pursue the fact that, yes, trauma is mobile, but the complexion of trauma, the nature of trauma changes as people move from one place to the other. So that what Forter 2007 we call mundane catastrophes that characters get to express in the homeland become transformed when they get to the foreign land in the first place. So that's a summary of my argument. Talking about African migrant literature, how do we describe African migrant literature if you're trying to do some kind of conceptual clarification? I wouldn't want to take it for granted. So I'll say we can describe such as, I will use the same idea in Foster 2015 and say it describes the work of a disparate yet distinct group of African authors who are really focused on migration, on the migratory experiences of African characters in the context of globalization. And they really lay so much emphasis on the entanglement, the entangled nature of the relationship between migration and the colonial processes, and see migration itself as an offshoot of the colonial processes. So, and in that instance, Afropolitanism comes into the picture because most of the characters that they usually portray are characters that are marked by certain kind of unrootedness. They're cultural netizens, like you used the term earlier on. They do not, sometimes they are not really rooted in the African identity, and they're not really rooted. They just talk about global experiences in most cases. And this is attested in the literature. For example, Sian 2001, I talked about this. Some of these narratives that we call African migrant literature originate as border crossings and cannot be bound by national borders, languages, and literary traditions. They are literature of crisis and of change, and this, you see, they suffer alternately from some kind of amnesia. If it is not a cultural amnesia, sometimes it's some kind of too much remembering, and they are precariously positioned at the instances of different species, histories, and language. I'm trying to paraphrase that. So that's trying to characterize African migrant literature. Perhaps a good summary of the content of African migrant literature will be found in Kajetan Yeka and Jack Taylor's African Migration Narratives, Politics, Race, and Space. It's a very rich book discussing the recurrent thematic preoccupations that we have generally in those texts. Nostalgia, race. Okay, fine. Well, I'll have to go faster now. I think so. I should say that, well, in terms of mobilizing theory here and there, I'm working within pragmatic stylistics as an anchor. I also borrowed a bit of an eclectic framework consisting of the concept of psychonarration as a central theme. Then the idea of a space of flow too. I was able to, I like the fluidity, the concept of fluidity and flexibility as advanced by that too. And then Van Leeuwen's model of role allocation, from linguistics. But the main anchor is actually psychonarration as a concept from Elizabeth Black, and then Carrod's literary trauma theory. So what were some of the things I found out? I actually used two texts in this instance: Elona Bilan's Travelers and Chika Unigwe's On Black Sister Streets, okay, to look at this. Now, in Elona Bila's Travelers, there are a number of characters that are presented as having undergone some key traumatic experiences. But then there's a transformation in my own reading of the kind of traumatic experiences. Most of them come from this, they are victims of a post-colonial condition, but as they move out of the country and they move to other spaces, they still encounter some kind of trauma that are a bit different from what they encountered at home. For example, if you look at Mark, it was political persecution at home that moved Mark out of Eritrea. But by the time she got to a new space, by the time she moved out of Eritrea and moved to Europe, then it was separation from family, displacement. And we have the markers of this in the way language is used to portray, is expressed. Then if it's for Manu, it was some kind of nostalgia, the loss of loved ones and all of that. But by the time she moved to Europe, there's a transformation this time around from that sense of loss of loved ones due to the political situation in his country, Mali. By that time, it became survival guilt. He became guilty of having survived what? Of having survived that tragedy. And so he carried that around. I do not want to believe that all traumas are traumas. I want to believe that certain kind of trauma caused by socio-political situations and inept leadership are survived once we move out of our post-colonial space. Of course, we carry the insignias of them. The residues of them are always there. But you then note that other kind of life challenges, especially unrootedness, displacement, are what to encounter when you get to Europe. The same thing for Portia, the same thing for Karim. And so it's more about displacement and alienation outside the African space. Now, not about the inanities that post-colonial conditions actually put on us as a result of inept leadership. If you go to Chika Anigwe's on Black Sister Streets too, we see the harrowing experiences of 4 different characters that underwent some kind of traumatic experiences or that undergo some kind of traumatic experience, from Sisi to Amma to Efe and to Joyce. So if I had enough time, I would have been able to illustrate this. But the idea I'm pushing generally is that at every point in time, you note that there's a transformation of the traumatic experiences as they move from one space to the other. And my argument then is that there may be trauma mobility, but trauma mobility would have to be studied in a nuanced manner so that we see how space affects the nature of trauma mobility, as the case may be. I think I would have to rest my initial case here to come back later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Yeah. So I think I can go now, so that we can move on to the Q&A. Bros, I think I have a slide, if you don't mind. Yeah. Or some slides, so that it doesn't appear like I'm deceiving people. It's just one slide. Yeah, I think you downloaded it already, but you can download it again. There's no problem. Yeah, LSA. Yeah, the one at the top. Okay, so I'll just try to start from saying that I want to move the audience from the turgid, abstract concept of the social media that is being presented and trauma to bring us to material objects, through discussions on artifacts. Just for a bit of clarification, I would like to state that spatiality, within the context of this presentation, is defined as the character of space, how space defines identity through some of its components. And I'm going to look at the context of the return of artifacts in describing some of these characters. Please, the next slide. So I take a cue from Friedrich Nietzsche's definition of culture in his Untimely Meditations, when he was looking at culture as unity of all artistic styles in all the expressions of the life of a people, which means the creative products of a people is embedded as part and parcel of their culture. And that is why it's relevant that whatever artifacts that a people have is not taken away from there, because it's a quotidian part of them, that they have to leverage at all times in navigating the challenges of life as a whole. Please, the next slide. So I also look at Guy Debord's definition of culture, which he presents in a dialectical manner. He sees culture as a product of the frictions between tradition and innovation. Tradition being the constant aspect of culture, which is always in bad. So I think culture, it's like a cycle. Culture becomes tradition when it's practiced for an extended period of time. But at some point, it also has to engage with certain aspects of innovation. And that's why discussions about the social media aspect comes in, which itself is a creative space. You talk about non-fungible tokens these days and some other material culture that are being, transformed into the virtual space. So this aspect of culture is very important to say that it is something that is enlivened, it's something that is always active, it's something that is looking, to progress. And art is a core part of this, because as creative humans, we are always looking to improve, our interactions with our fellow humans and even with the environment. So I think we should have this at the back of our minds while we're going to be looking at artifacts that are, have been returned from Europe. The next slide, please. I go back to Nietzsche, and I look at Nietzsche's critique of modernity.
Cut you short, Dr. Phil.
Yes.
But I don't think we're seeing your slides.
Oh, really? So my slides are not visible to them.
Like we can see the screen, but we're stuck on the first slide.
It's not changing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is it changing now?
You can share again. You can just stop and share again. Please let us know if there's any change.
Okay.
Can just escape.
Don't worry, this would not count, as your time.
There's no problem. It's good to carry people along as well, yeah. Thanks for calling our attention. Because I'm just trying to speak to the slides themselves. Can you just use escape button if it's going to answer you?
Can you see the next slide
Okay,
now?
now we're better. Yes, now we're good. Yes, please.
Okay, so what is you can see something on the critique of modernity, right?
Yes, we can.
Yes, critique of modernity now.
So moving from culture as a product of tradition and innovation, like I initially stated, I go back to the colonial experience where these things were taken away. As a form of modernity, of course, people talk about the postmodern era, but we know that there was the attempt of presenting a universal culture, which you know more than myself, so I'll not bore you with it. But what I'm trying to bring out here, like the part of the slide that I highlighted, is on the fact of the power relations, between the conquered and the colonial powers, and how it was like an entitlement to appropriate some of the material culture or even humans of these persons. So this is what has brought us here, and this is where we are trying to redefine, the meaning of some of these materials as they moved across spaces, both within the continent and in diaspora. You can go to the next slide, please.
No.
Iwa, can you share from your end? You can stop. She also has the slides. She can. Do you have it on your end, Iwa? She's not okay. All right, but if you can show because I don't have any other text. I also want to go to a next slide that extracts a quotation from there.
Maybe Dr. Phil, sir.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Philip,
Yes,
if
sir.
there's a technological challenge, I mean, we can still flow with your conversation though.
There's no problem. Okay. Yeah, can you? Okay. Is it now? I think we have the slides back on. So, can you see it? Can you see the
Yes,
slides now? Okay.
yes,
Okay, so you
yes.
can go to the yeah, so just from what I said the last time, just to save our time, it's also to say that the power relations was such that was done in a very brutal manner, and it cuts across different races, like Nietzsche was trying to push those that presented themselves as the standard of morality of the period, had the challenge in terms of the implementation of the standards that they had set from themselves. And what I'm trying to establish is the fact that we need to also redress some sorts of assumptions that tries to reflect that the state of knowledge at the time. I mean, it's not like the convention that the state of knowledge at the time was one that supported, the plunder. So there are scholars like this that also criticized, some of these appropriations, even from the cultural aspects of appropriating some of these material objects. The next slide, please. Now we now look at the context of spatiality as commodified mundane, the meanings of these objects who were just deposited in museums, abroad, and even the challenge of having to negotiate their return, even from the position of disadvantage, to say that, like you see the caption from this news from courts, that they're only going to loan back what was stolen to the owners, So this reflects the commodification of this that made these materials just mundane arts, to be used, to enhance the economic or for the economic benefits of nations who initially stole them. You can go to the next slide. But I say that these objects mean more than they are being projected. And I look at the three fathers of negritude from their own creative nature as well, looking at some of their poems, and how they try to describe, their experiences. Of course, Leon Damas from French Guyana was speaking, who himself was within the diaspora, was speaking about how the colonial experience or the experience within the diaspora made things more complex than they ought to be, and he used the symbolism of just dolls, and his aspiration to say that things weren't as complex as this, because within their own cultural purview, people could relate, to them as they were. So this will become clearer. So I use this as creating a narrative between the poetry of the three well-known figures of negritude, even if some would argue that there are some others, especially women, who contributed to this movement, and they are not being projected as they ought to. Please, you can go to the next slide. From drawing from these complexities, I'm looking at Senghor, who himself perhaps at some point was within the diaspora, but more or less is related to of art experience, within the continent itself. And he describes what these objects actually, stood for, how they were used, as a medium for communicating, for relating, with the ancestral commune. And this reflects that there was like a unified conceptualization of the African cosmogony. And these objects, represented for them something beyond just mundane materials. It was very core, to their being. And so the appropriation was something that just went beyond taking away objects to taking away parts of humans, that they used even for their own quotidian survival. Please, you can go to the next slide. So I also go to Diasporic, thank you, where it talks about the environmental aspect, of these material artifacts. Like there is like a whole community, so that when you remove something from that environment, you tend to destabilize, the rhythm. You tend to destabilize the rhythm that has been built over time, and so it makes allusions to the sky, it makes allusion to the soil and how these things have been rooted, in them, so that creating disrupting the equilibrium within the system also affects, the psychosocial dimension of people. You can go to the next slide. Now, bringing it back home to how relevant these projections from the Negritude fathers were, we'll look at the kinds of ritual that attended the return of the ancestral stools, that had been returned, I think, to the National Museums Commission from Germany for a while before it was now taken to the palace, and how the Oba danced, with some other members of the Edo community in receiving it, and he had to also perform some rituals with powder because of how symbolic these objects were for his own ancestral lineage and for the whole kingdom in general. And that is to say that the meanings of these objects changed across the different spaces where they occupied at each material point in time. And now to my final slide. I think I've gone beyond my time. So we're looking at what kinds of values do these artifacts have, with the noise, so much noise about the return of artifacts, and how people are making a lot out of it. How do we, evaluate or try to conceptualize the relevance of these artifacts that are being returned? While this must not necessarily, so the contention is that this must not necessarily be in material terms, because across time, it's possible that even the material value of some of these objects, maybe based on what the wear and tear over time or some other factors, may have diminished. This is not necessarily so. It may increase in some cases where they are like exoticas, scarce commodities and very important commodities. But the valuation itself should be in terms of the cultural importance or the symbolisms of this as something that is integral to the realities of these persons. And so this is the turn that we must take as major stakeholders in the reception of some of these artifacts and in their preservation, which means that there must be some sort of investment in looking at these cultural products as something that is integral within the system, and that valuation of importance should be something that would determine how they are being preserved or kept and retained, within the communities. I think this is basically my presentation. So thank you very much for, obliging me to make the presentation. So I think we should go straight to open the floor for comments and questions to those that are basically online that made their presentation. I think you permit me to open the floor. Someone raised their hand. Okay, you can allow, because we can't see it here. So. Iwa, you can meanwhile take over the moderation of those online because I can't see the screen right now. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Leia Komolafe raising his hand. So please unmute yourself. You can ask your question. Hi, Leia.
Can you go to the attendees? Yeah. Allowed to talk, please. Yeah, Leia, you can speak now.
He's still there. You can unmute yourself, Leia.
Can you unmute him as well? Okay, thanks. No, up. Ask to unmute. Yeah. Or maybe it's not on the system. But if there's any other person, you can go first.
No questions.
We can have someone else. Okay, yeah. So there's someone here that wants to speak, Dr. Adiola. Okay. Yeah, you can speak freely. Larry, we can't hear you if you are speaking, actually.
Okay, now I think
Okay, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes,
we
Can
can.
you hear me now?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
sorry, I was preparing for sight and sound, but the sound will do for now, by the way. Thank you so much for your presentation, Iwa, and Mr. S. Akintela and Dr. Phil. Thank you. It's good to have you guys again, at least virtually. So, Iwa, when you were describing your approach to understanding the diaspora, you give us just to know how many minutes do I have, because you can't work with Dr. Yomi and not take your time reacting to presentation.
3 minutes.
So 3
Because
minutes.
you have to close by 7, and it's like
Oh, all right,
quarter
all
to
right,
7
all
actually. Yeah.
All right, that's fine. God help me. So you gave a description of what you consider to be the faces of the diaspora movement, and I think you might want to work more on that regarding putting them in some appropriate terms. For instance, the pre-colonial era of movement, which is time of slavery, you may need to categorize that as properly, right, as forced migration. And the contemporary one would have different coloration. On the one hand, you could raise questions whether this is self-reflective migration or if it's also forced some way. For instance, I argued, sometimes ago at the staff club that what I see about the migration of our health workers from Nigeria to the UK is technically an act of poaching, by the British government, because the leverage given to health workers you won't give the same to non-professionals. So you may want to consider such movements within the confines of, if it's possible to call it poaching, or if not. Then the third phase, talk about is, some other phase within this movement is the one you call the JAPA movement, right? When people say that education is the best way to move. You may also want to check the data regarding this, because I'm not sure, but the last time I checked, the number of Nigerians migrating or immigrating from the country to the US and the UK, the percentage of those who are coming to these countries to study is still less than professionals who are moving, through what I call poaching and other means. So you might want to readdress your point regarding education as the easiest way of migrating to Europe and North America, if you have this additional information. And then now, finally, or not finally, yes, well, I still have 2 minutes. You talked about, you mentioned becoming, right? I know how difficult it is to be a black person, to be a Nigerian, in the US, because my experience in the last 11 months or 10, 11 months, I mean, you can also relate based on where you live currently in Miami. Is it really becoming, or people are trying to have cultural and existential navigation? Is it becoming or cultural and existential navigation? Because prior to moving to the US, right, the anxieties that one would have, the post-corona anxieties, like Taylor put it rightly, is quite different from the kind of anxieties you have right now. So is it really becoming, or it's just a matter of trying to navigate, the social space that we have? And one more thing regarding this is also this question about home ties. Home ties. The home ties people try to extend or expand online. Is it really their own view, or is it to an extent performative? Because some could be performative, given the way capital is now involved in cultural production online. What are the things that will trend? How much followership could you get? What are the subjects? What topics are people addressing, online? So using the social media space as the main data for knowing what's, the notion of cultural production in diaspora might not be that easy, right? You may want to focus on the other nuanced position on this. So the last minute now. There's this gentleman who is in the UK, Eleti is a comedian. Back in Nigeria, he used to do some comedy skits. He continues it in the UK. He calls himself Oluwaye Awon Dependence, because his spouse is the one. Yeah, his spouse is the one in the UK, and then he's there as a dependent. And I've tried to follow the trajectory of his comedy over time. And then you could feel in the last 3, 4 or 4 months, you would feel someone who is slightly, in quotes, I can't be so sure about this, sliding into depression based on the way he narrates his experience in the UK. That if the country was going to give me everything needed, it wouldn't be in the UK and what have you. So these are part of the things you might want to consider, that in terms of cultural production, is it informed by capital, or is it informed by the lived experience of those who really have this anxiety of what it means to be a Black person living in the West? So the question of home ties then becomes not so easy to navigate, right? It becomes not so easy to navigate because you have this sense of remittances back to the country on the one hand, and you also have this sense of participating in the cultural production on the other hand. But whether or not capital...
Okay, we have to wrap up. Thank you, Mr. Lay. Let's just take one more person so that I can have the response. Yeah, Dr. Ajola, quickly. 2 sentences.
I don't know if this is a contribution of the question.
Yeah, that's fine. Contribution is better.
My question is actually directed to Dr. Philip regarding the celebration of razzmatazz that greeted the and we witnessed with the return of these artifacts from Benin. We know naturally historically that artifacts usually they actually embedded with spiritual connotation beyond their cultural values. So what are the spiritual relevance of some of these artifacts returned to Benin beyond them just being symbols and objects? So wouldn't they have lost their spiritual essence for over 120 years? What is there to be celebrated about the so-called objects? Do you understand what I'm trying?
Yeah, I understand it. And I'll quickly go. It's not difficult. What I'm saying is even the celebration itself was a ritual. So, and I see the ritual as reactivating. There's a video that's trending online, and the Oba had to perform some rituals with powders, sprinkling several. So it wasn't like they were just dancing, but there were some spiritual aspects of it, perhaps reactivating, the essence of these tools themselves. Yeah. So I'll yield because you have to leave this room now. So if you speak too much, we're out of this space. Yeah, Iwa.
Okay. Thank you, Leah, for your questions. Okay, so I'll start from the first question, which is basically a redefinition of the faces, at least the way I understand it, a redefinition of the faces of migration, migration movements. And I think that is actually interesting in the terms of, okay, trying to rename it. And I do know that, yes, according to the sources that I read, yes, there was the pre-colonial migration flows. There was like the post-colonial and then the colonial. And you were also talking about redefining Japa in that sense, that the sources, so yes, I will consider, first of all, the sources about the data in terms of people who are moving. But don't also forget that my research is based on generation type. So I am talking according to data that I am also seeing according to certain generations on this statistics, on this statistic website. So I had to go through the UK census statistics as at 2021, and they have it until 2023, I think June, and they would actually tell you the visas they grant that are based on education and visas that they grant that are based on dependency. So all of that information is there. And that was
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, sorry. And that was what led to that. Next, I think another thing that you talked about, sorry, it was a lot of questions and I was trying so hard to scribble them down. You talked about cultural production. Okay, another thing is, do not forget that this research is a mixed methods research. So when you talked about how digital footprints can be performative, I found that very interesting. And that is why I used a mixed method research, a mixed method, quantitative and qualitative. So I did something called a correlation analysis. And that was why, you know, the time was fast spent while we were talking, so I couldn't really focus on those slides. But I went through, after I gathered the 212 tweets, I went through the engagement metrics for each tweet. And that means I checked the comments, the likes, and then compiled the numbers, and then did a correlation analysis. So I get what you're saying. And that was why I said I did a correlation of comments versus tweets, comments versus likes, or engagement metrics. And there are algorithmic biases in the sense of how people, in the sense of what you share does not necessarily mean it's based on content. What is being shared does not necessarily mean that it's relevant to diasporic reality. But the main thing is that I was able to use this to talk about the realities of the diaspora. Okay, Dr. Phil.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, because I understand it. The thing is that they're already packing. So I don't want you to just see that they packed the camera before
Okay.
we pack
Yeah,
it.
don't
Yeah.
worry, we can discuss it later. We can discuss this later.
So it's very important. So I don't know whether Professor Olorunyomi and Dr. Tella have like just 10 seconds last words so that we'll just leave. Yeah. Prof, sir.
It's obvious that this is a continuing conversation. Obviously, I need to understand where it was coming from, because the intensity is at the layer of the more recent diaspora, I think between Nigeria and the UK. I'll take a look at that and see what other references, either through creative works or otherwise, one can relate to this. I will share our thoughts with you. Thank you, and thanks for inviting me. Thanks so much. And Dr. Phil, and my colleague, Dr. Tella.
Yes, sir. Dr. Tella.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. It's been nice being here. Just 2 things, and directly to you, for that matter. I think the conception of space has to be clearer.
Okay.
So that nobody lumps up your idea of space with some other things and think you are strictly thinking of space in geographical terms. So you need to really sit down and think around space and spatiality, and so that it doesn't look like it's just space as geography alone. You still need to pay attention to that. Then the use of these digital humanity tools, fine, they help a lot for data analysis, but they can't go beyond quantification. So you should just be sure that your interpretation is very solid and you don't rely too much on them. You need to look at the context of the occurrence so that there's no over-reliance on machine not that I see any over-reliance, it's just a fear just something for you to note. Just be suspicious of them.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tella. Not to say that this is like an exam, but it's also to improve, on all of our contributions. So I'd like to thank. Okay, no, it's not in my place. So Iwa, you have the last. Is your panel? Sorry.
Okay. So I would like to at this point I would like to say something. I'll let you in on a small secret. So this for me was like a minor defense before the brother defense. Yes, but I didn't say it. So this is something I'm also working on for my brother master's thesis, and I like the angles by which we've taken it. I wish we had more time because I had some things to say to Dr. Tella about trauma, mobility, and all of that, and also to respond to Leia's questions, Professor Oloriomi's comments. But thank you so much for taking the time out to come here to discuss this. This panel is very close to my heart because these are all my mentors, and so this is more of a family kind of thing. And it's like Leia said, it's so good to see you guys again, even if it's virtually. So thank you so much. Have a safe trip home if you're there physically, and bye-bye.
Yeah, you should read those that are
That's my HOD. That's my HOD. That's my HOD. HOD music.
We are going for, don't delay us, we are going for dinner. We're actually going for dinner. Don't allow
the how much of deliver club? Joe, man sent me direct.
Okay, what's it
Baba kini Leia, kini wọ́n sọ.
One for fún mi owó ní ilé
ọgbọ́n. Wọ́n jọ post proverbial létí mi.
Tẹ́lá, bàbá yẹn, kí ni méjì nílẹ̀ ṣe fún mi rí kankan mu.
Àlẹ́ àdùn làwọn mú.